Welcome back to the Destination Dream Job podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Orlando Haynes. He is a talent acquisition professional with 20-year track record of shaping careers and fostering talent. He is a three-time published author, providing readers with insightful perspectives, actionable strategies, and motivational insights that resonate with job seekers and professionals at various stages of their careers. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Steph. So excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, so when we were talking about what the topic would be, you shared that you wanted to talk about balancing your 9 to 5 with your 5 to 9, and I love that. So, do you want to share a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so right, we all have different goals, aspiration, and dreams. Some folks are more corporate driven, where they just want to go all the way up to the C-suite level, and there are some of us that hey, I have more talents that's being utilized or not being utilized, rather, in the corporate space. So how do I monetize those skills? Or it's the same skills, but how do I tap into another revenue stream and utilize that in the marketplace? And so being able to balance that, right, it's a journey. Some people call it the entrepreneur, where you're doing both corporate and you got your toe dipped into the entrepreneurship as well. So there's different variables. I know a ton of people who do it, and some folks have made the full transition. And so I want to talk about what that looks like, just kind of a day in the life, and what are the expectations and the hours that look like it, because it feels sometimes like it's fully entrepreneur because you're working from sun up to sun up, right? And so just building your dream while you're supporting your corporate function as well. And so I think it's a great topic for folks to understand, because the big push you always hear is entrepreneurship. Well, there are folks who just don't want to do that. And so there's still opportunities for them to again monetize what they already know, but still work a corporate job.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first, I started a few businesses that didn't really do anything, but I
Hmm.
found it really hard to work a business while I was working full time. I came from the nonprofit world, and so there's a lot of overworked and underpaid, and so there's a need to start something else, but also it's a lot when you're giving a lot at work. And so, yeah, so what do you think are some common challenges that people face when they're trying to balance, their full-time role with their side hustle?
So I think what people need to know too is what their side hustle is going to be. For me, it's been lucky because it aligns with what I do in my day job. I'm in talent acquisition and recruiting. And so my transition to running a podcast and career coaching, it still all aligns around career development. So I've been lucky in that space. But if you're someone who's doing the opposite, the exact opposite of what you do in corporate, then you have to find out, what effort does it take to, what does that market look like? What is building up a client base look like? How much time am I doing, building clientele outside, externally, or am I going to be going out of state to build clients, events, and so really building out that framework of what does that look like? And so, and again, the time invested. So if you have family and they're supportive of you doing that for him or her, whoever it is, that's great. I would tell folks to have that discussion first with family, and that's probably what I should have started off with. Like, hey, tell your family what you want to do, regardless of, again, if it's in alignment with what you do in corporate. But I figure it's easier because you've already built up this level of expertise, a network, and things like that. But it doesn't matter either way. And then have that discussion to say, this is what I'm planning to do with some of my free time. But make sure, if you're single, you have all the time in the world to do it. But if you have a family, it's, this is what I need to do. This is the goal. This is the vision. And so I need family support. I'll need that encouragement, because I'm going to be putting in some late hours, right? You're going to be burning the candle at each end, to get your dream off the ground for whatever vision you have for your life.
Hmm. Yeah, so that was an interesting point you brought up, is
Mhm.
that you need to know what the side hustle is. So do you have any tips for how someone, like, do you recommend they stay with something that's related to their 9 to 5, something completely different? Do you think there's like a right and wrong way to do that? Or how do people decide what their side hustle should be?
Yeah, great question. So I wouldn't say it's the right or wrong way. if I would say easy or hard, it's easier to already utilize the skills you're doing in corporate. So if you're a project manager, great. How do you then outsource your skill sets to small businesses to help them develop a project management process in their organization? You're already doing it. You're just doing it now for a different monetized fee, right? You can double what you make on your hourly rate or triple it and saying, whatever, you make $50 an hour in your corporate job. I'm going to charge you guys $150 an hour for my services for this project base, right? But if you're someone, again, who's in project management, but you love photography, I have friends that are in IT and they do photography and graphic design. They just do the legwork to say, okay, how do I market this this skill set in the industry? Because maybe you're not as versed as what the current price is, you know what's the latest and greatest software for this. So it takes a little more research, especially if you were just dabbling at it and now you want to make it a business, versus already knowing what you know in the corporate space. You've already learned a bit of the industry standards, right? And then so again, that transition is a bit more seamless versus starting over. But again, I think it's about the passion too. So if you have the passion for something else, that's great, because I'm all about tapping into multiple talents. God's given us multiple talents that we can tap into. And so, how do we maximize that to create opportunities for ourselves and not rely on just the corporate dollar to fund our life, but also drive more revenue streams in case, as you see the market now,
Mm.
Steph, as well, is that, things are happening, layoffs are happening. And so, I think people need to really start to break out into different avenues to create a safe space for them and almost a safety net with utilizing again the talents that they've been gifted.
Yeah, it's so true because, 5 years ago, people would be like, oh, I want a job to have that security. But as you can see now with all the layoffs, having a job does not necessarily mean that security, right?
Hmm.
So having that side hustle or, full-time business you can have a little bit more control in certain areas. In terms of doing like I'm interested because I never really did it properly. Like I kind of, like I said, I dabbled in it when I was working full time, doing a little bit on the side, but I didn't really truly dive in. So I'm really curious, like, how do you think people who have a family, how do they balance everything while still not taking too much time away from your family? I know sacrifices need to be made, but yeah, I'm just curious more about that balancing side to be able to not burn out. That's what I'm thinking about. I feel like I would have burnt out if I did that.
Yeah, so it's twofold, right? It's having that upfront communication and having the right partner too, right? So if you know early on you want to diversify your skills, and let's say if you're not married, and so that's something you would have conversations on early too, right? Aside from how do we raise a family, make money, and all that stuff, you want to say, hey, this is my goal. So by saying yes, I work in corporate, but I also want to create a business on the side, that's going to take more time. And so if that partner is willing to be like, great, I love your vision, your aspiration, whether it's him or her, and they're saying, I'm all in no matter what, I'm willing to help you, then that's great. And so that conversation and process becomes a little bit easier. But let's say I'll even bring it all the way home. So my wife is very ambitious as well. And so she does something in the kind of development space with women empowerment, right? And so I do what I do in career development. And so right now, at this very moment, right, she had to run off and go pick up our daughter while I'm here with you having this amazing conversation. And so there's a schedule I put in place, and so the whole family, all of my kids know, my wife know, daddy's doing this at this time, so not to disturb him, because the goal in what I'm trying to achieve is to support the family and give us a better life. And so when you have those conversations on a consistent basis and continue to share with your life partner, this is the goal, this is the commitment, and as it increases, it's going to take up more time, but then you still have to be able to control it to know, all right, this is taking up too much time, because you don't want to wake up, you're driving 6 months, a year later, and you've missed so much of your family's life. And then your kids or your wife are like, hey, we haven't really seen you. You haven't been present. So it's that you have to be self-aware and knowing how much you can take on, and how much you can't, right? And balancing that when you do have a family. So it's all about the communication piece, setting a clear vision and goals so they can buy in and support that. But you have to be also supportive as well when it's their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Absolutely, that communication to be able to build that in. I'm curious to know, have you
Mhm.
worked with people? I'm assuming you worked with people who've done it as a side hustle, and other people like me. I mean, I was laid off, so I didn't really have anything else to do, so I just started a business, and it was a challenge. I'll tell you. You know, going in full time is has its pros and cons, as well as starting a side hustle has its pros and cons.
Mhm.
Do you recommend one or the other to people, or do you typically encourage them to start as a side hustle first and then transition to full time later?
So that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever recommended anyone to say, hey, go full time. I know I've shared and said, you know what, you do have the ability and talent to be able to start a side hustle. And then based on, my previous answers, here's what you need to look out for first. And people who have come up to us, and my wife was like, hey, can you coach us on, the business strategy and things like that. And so we've had conversations with folks, but I think what's most important to let folks know is the why you're doing this, right? Because whether you're starting full-time entrepreneur, which a lot of folks in social media promotes like it, they think it's flashy, um, it's more work than what you would do in corporate, right? There is no Saturdays and Sundays off. There is no benefit. So you're on the grind constantly. Folks like myself, we still kind of have that little bit of a safety net, but the goal is to build up the other portion. And so if we choose to exit corporate, we've done it in that sense. And so, but I can never, again, I wouldn't say I told someone, hey, quit your job and go full time. But I've talked to folks and said, I see the ability for you to at least create revenue based on the talents you have. And you should really think about, adding that into your repertoire of skill sets, driving revenue in here. And so it all depends because some folks just don't want the extra work. Some people, life is hard as it is. And so to add more work, I want to see the passion for it first before I would open my mouth to say, "Hey, I can help you a little bit, give you a little bit of direction." But if I want it more for you than you want it for yourself, I wouldn't have that conversation with that individual.
Right on. And I absolutely agree. I think it's a major red flag if a coach says quit your job and go full time.
Yeah,
I think that they are not being truthful about how
no.
hard it is. Like, let's be totally honest here. Like,
And
if I
then
could I did it, but it was not easy. There were lots of really, really hard days.
Yeah, and then you have the gurus, the so-called gurus who are saying if you're making 300, 400,000 a year, you should be ashamed of yourself. Or if you're making 70,000 a month or 17,000 a month, you may think that's a lot of money, but really, and these are millionaires, like that is a lot of
Mm,
money. Well, like you're
mm,
kidding, right? That puts you in the 1 percentile of America. It's like that still is a lot of money. So you
yeah.
can't really trust what's coming out of IG,
Hmm.
in all these so-called gurus. Yes, they're millionaires, but the advice they're giving is from a whole different stratosphere now, right? We're not in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I remember when just like 5 or 6 years ago, we were introduced to the 5 a.m. club where it was like
Mm,
business owners need to be up at 5 and you need to be doing your business before you go to work and all this stuff. And it was
yeah.
just not sustainable for me. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this and stay motivated because I'm not a morning person. So 5 a.m. is not a time that I like to see on the clock.
Hmm.
And so do you have any recommendations for people to stay motivated while maybe doing it in their own way?
Yeah. So another great question. So I would tell folks this is how I look at it. And when folks have that big goal, or if they have a big revenue goal or task goal, where they say, "I want to be able to do XYZ by this month." It's not so much the big wins, right? It's the little wins, the accumulation of little wins that help. You sending an email and to target a company, them responding, you're getting a meeting, you're getting traction, you can submit a bid for whatever product or service you're selling, and there's an engagement and conversation, right? That small win builds massive confidence to say, oh my God, like even for my podcast, the first time I submitted to pitch a company for a sponsorship, I got the sponsorship. It was quirky, it was floppy. I had to create a contract on the fly, the pricing model on the fly, but they said yes. And so that was super exhilarating for me to be like, wow, I didn't have to go buy somebody's program and this and that. I just did a little research, learned, put together a crafted email, and it landed. And now that's not to say it's going to work every time, but I think those little wins energize the individuals to keep going. Great, I got the meeting. All right, the meeting didn't work out. I didn't land a client, but it got me through the door, and I've learned from that communication. I now know where my gaps are for the next one. Let me prep a little better. Boom, I know what they're looking for. Okay, let me prep a little better. The next one to the next one, right? And so it's really celebrating those little wins and understanding that accumulation of that, you win more in the little wins than you do in the big win, because you think it's going to be this massive euphoria. Oh, it's great and this and that. You're like, all right, now that I'm here, what's next? And so you always have to be thinking, what's next? And Kevin Hart has this stand-up show called What's Next. It's been out for years, but that's the also the mindset. Okay, I land this account, but what's next? How can I mushroom it into multiple, or go for the next, or leverage what I just did into the next one? So there's always should be thinking of what's next, along with celebrating those little wins. Because again, you can have a bunch of little wins, especially when you're starting off, that'll feel powerful, that'll drive you through the toughest times, because you're learning so much, and your belief and your faith is building up, because you're like, wow, this has actually happened. And then you kind of think too, like, oh yeah, the people on IG, some people are really telling the truth, and then some folks that are inflating it, but you're saying it's actually happening to me. So now you're thinking, this can really happen. I can turn this into a six-figure business, or whatever, goal you have, because you're actually seeing the little wins accumulate faster than you realize.
Mm. I really liked what you said. It kind of made me think of it's really about the journey. I
Hmm.
know my business and my podcast is named Destination Dream Job, but I truly don't believe it's an end goal, right? It's not something that we're going to achieve and we're just going to be like, I've arrived. It's all about, like what you just said, the goalposts continue to move, right?
Hmm.
So you're like, oh, I reached this goal and now, oh, there's a new goal that's set up and now I want to go achieve that. And so really we never arrive, but we do need to celebrate when we achieve our goals and the wins along the way, because it's really all about the journey. I really love that.
Absolutely.
In terms of, time management, that can be a really tough thing for people, managing their 9 to 5 and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any tips for time management strategies in terms of how much they should be putting into their business, or how they kind of structure that to make sure that they're seeing growth, but like we said, they're not burning out as well?
Yeah, I wish there were a silver bullet, right? I don't care what books are out there talking about time management and software to help you schedule your day and manage your day. When you're trying to, get a business off the ground, it's almost like that work life balance is not existent, right? You have to put in the reps. You have to put in the reps. So it does require those late hours, to where you're going to midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, just to get one task done. So there will never be a silver bullet to be able to build a business. Even when you're solo, again, you're in the midst of it now, Steph. So it's not always easy. And you cutting off your day early, it's good if you can manage that, and that's working for you, and it's building towards what folks are looking for in their life. But if they're looking to do something great, there's a saying, right? You don't have to be great to get started, but you do have to get started to be great. And so it's going to take the massive amount of action, and that's from Tony Robbins. He just says, take a massive, immediate, massive action, and put in the reps, put in the work, and then you can get to a point to where now you start to manage the time. And so as we look at, again, the folks that are hyper successful, who may have a busy schedule or kind of laid back in their schedule, that wasn't always the case. They had to put in the heavy lifting now, so they can live the way they want to live later. And so that's the goal and trajectory most of us are on, until we reach the goal that we want to achieve. So the time management piece comes so later. In even the gurus, and I'll wrap this up. The gurus who say, I did this. I just hired more people to take this time. That's still work. You're still working, right? So you got to do the interviews, you got to do the research, whoever you've trusted, you know, all those conversations, you got to make a decision. It's the training, the negotiate, all that stuff. That still work. You're just shifting the work at some point so you can take it off your plate, but until that's there, you're still doing the work. And so the balance is what's worked best for your life. And again, back to having the conversations with your family. I think each iteration of, you know, going through changes in your business and career, you need to be having those conversations, because there can be seasons where it's longer than others. And so having those prep talks will help, and be able to manage your schedule around that.
Yeah, and I do think it would be good to clarify early on to what kind of business you want, right? Is
Right.
this something you want to just be on the side, or is this something you want to make full time later? Because then that can also help with, how much time you need to put into it after work hours. Because if it's
Hmm.
just something you're trying to grow to have a little bit of passive extra income, you probably don't. I mean, I guess you could still stay up till 1 in the morning, but maybe you don't have to. And then, but if you're wanting to build something to replace your full time income, you really do have to put in the reps and put in the time and take that action in order to, see the results. Or it's just gonna take a lot longer.
Right, right. So, like, if you're doing an e-commerce business, I think you'll still put in the hours, but it may take shorter time versus if you're doing more face-to-face, hand-to-hand combat service providing, like career coaching. Right, that's more time consuming than someone strictly building an e-commerce business.
Right. Awesome.
Hmm.
This was so insightful. Thank you so much for sharing all these tips. I'm sure people are going to find some serious value from it, especially for people who've been thinking about starting their side hustle. This can be their push to get them started. If people are interested in working with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, appreciate it, Steph. Great conversation. They can find me on my website at careertalks.com. I'm primarily on LinkedIn as well, but if they want to go to my website, again, that's careertalkspodcast.com. But they can see me on LinkedIn daily, posting and having conversations, and they'll see our upcoming episode where you're on the podcast soon. So definitely stay tuned and look for that as well.
Yeah, right on. If you guys didn't hear that, everyone is on LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. It is the place to be. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.